The coffee cup trembled in her hands just enough for the spoon to clink against the porcelain, a soft, helpless sound drowned by the noise of the diner. No one noticed. No one ever did. But the tears in her eyes burned so brightly that Amelia Carter feared they might spill over and expose everything she had spent years trying to hide. The Sunrise Diner sat at the edge of Route 17, a place people stopped not because they wanted to, but because they were tired, hungry, or lost. Amelia had worked there for 6 years, long enough to memorize the cracks in the floor tiles and the way the neon sign outside flickered every time it rained. She was 28, though the deep exhaustion in her eyes made her look older. That morning, like so many others, she had tied her apron too tightly around her waist, as if the pressure could hold her together. "Black coffee, no sugar," the customer said without looking up. Coming right up, Amelia replied automatically, her voice steady despite the storm inside her chest. As she turned toward the counter, her vision blurred. It wasn't the steam from the coffee machine. It was the memory of the phone call she'd received just an hour earlier, the landlord's voice, sharp and impatient, reminding her that rent was overdue again. 3 days, he'd said. 3 days, or she and her younger brother would be out on the street. Ethan's face flashed in her mind. 17 years old, asthmatic, brilliant at math and terrified of the future. She was all he had left. Amelia wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand before anyone could see. Crying didn't fix anything. It never had. She carried the coffee back to the booth near the window, unaware that someone was watching her closely. The stranger had been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, untouched coffee growing cold in front of him. His name was Daniel Rowan, though Amelia didn't know that yet. He looked out of place in the diner, not because of expensive clothes or flashy jewelry, but because of how still he was. He watched people the way someone watches a storm from a distance, alert and thoughtful. When Amelia set the cup down, Daniel finally looked up. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're welcome," she replied, already turning away. "Miss," he added gently. She paused, forcing a polite smile. "Yes. Are you okay?" The question caught her off guard. Customers complained about coffee being too hot or too cold, about toast being burned or eggs undercooked. No one ever asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," Amelia said quickly. Daniel studied her face, not rudely, not with pity, but with genuine concern. "You don't look fine." Something in his voice cracked the fragile wall she had built around herself. Her throat tightened. "I'm just tired," she said. "Long shift." He nodded, as if he understood more than she was saying. "I won't keep you. Just take care of yourself." She managed a small nod and walked away, her heart pounding. Why did that simple kindness feel heavier than all the harsh words she'd endured? The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Plates clattered. Orders were shouted. Amelia moved on autopilot, smiling when expected, apologizing when necessary. By the time the lunch rush died down, her feet ached and her head throbbed. She was wiping down the counter when Daniel approached, holding a folded receipt. "Excuse me," he said. "Yes, sir?" Amelia asked. "You forgot this," he said, handing it to her. She glanced down, confused. The receipt wasn't hers. "That's yours," he added. "For the coffee." Amelia unfolded the paper and froze. Inside was far more than the cost of a coffee. A $100 bill stared back at her. "I can't take this," she said immediately, pushing it toward him. "It's too much." Daniel shook his head. "It's a tip." "No one tips that much," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some people do," he replied calmly, "especially when they see someone who needs it." Her eyes filled with tears again. This time she couldn't stop them. "I don't want charity," she said. "It's not charity," Daniel said. "It's kindness. There's a difference." Amelia swallowed hard. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "And you can say no if you want." She hesitated, then slowly closed her fingers around the bill. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled, a small, sincere smile. "You're welcome." She watched him walk out, the bell above the door jingling softly. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt like something important had just happened. That evening, Amelia returned to the tiny apartment she shared with Ethan. The walls were thin, the furniture mismatched, but it was home. Ethan sat at the small kitchen table, textbooks spread out in front of him, his inhaler resting nearby. "How was work?" he asked. "Fine," Amelia said automatically, then hesitated. She pulled the bill from her pocket and placed it on the table. Ethan's eyes widened. Where did that come from? A customer, she said. Just a nice person. Ethan smiled. See? I told you. Not everyone in the world is awful. Amelia laughed softly, though worry still gnawed at her chest. $100 helped, but it didn't solve everything. The next morning, Daniel returned. This time, he ordered breakfast and actually ate it. Amelia served him, her movements more confident than the day before. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she replied. How's today treating you, he asked. She hesitated, then answered honestly. A little better. I'm glad, he said. Over the next week, Daniel became a regular. He came at different times, never intrusive, always polite. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, sometimes just smiles. Amelia found herself looking forward to seeing him, though she didn't understand why. One slow afternoon, Daniel stayed after paying his bill. Amelia, he said, reading her name from her tag. Can I ask you something? Sure, she said cautiously. What do you want to do, he asked. She blinked. With what? With your life, he said simply. The question stunned her. No one had asked her that in years. I don't know, she admitted. I wanted to be a nurse once. What happened? Life, she said with a sad smile. My mom got sick. My dad left. Someone had to pay the bills. Daniel nodded slowly. Do you still want to be a nurse? I don't see how, she said. School costs money. Time. Things I don't have. He leaned back slightly. What if you did? What if I did what? What if you tried again, he asked. Amelia laughed bitterly. Trying doesn't pay rent. No, Daniel agreed. But giving up costs more than people realize. She looked at him, searching his face. Why are you asking me this? Because I see someone who's surviving when she was meant to live, he said. Those words haunted her long after he left. Days turned into weeks. The landlord's deadline loomed closer. Amelia worked double shifts, her body screaming for rest. Ethan tried to help, taking a part-time job despite his health, but Amelia hated seeing him struggle. One night, she collapsed onto the couch, tears soaking into the worn fabric. I can't do this anymore, she whispered to the empty room. The next day at the diner, Amelia was quieter than usual. Daniel noticed immediately. Bad day, he asked gently. Bad life? She replied before she could stop herself. Daniel studied her for a moment. Would you sit down for a minute? He asked. She glanced around. I'm on shift. I'll talk to your manager, he said. Before she could protest, Daniel approached the counter. Minutes later, her manager waved her over, clearly confused but agreeable. Amelia sat across from Daniel, her hands folded tightly in her lap. What's going on? She asked. Daniel took a deep breath. I haven't been entirely honest with you. Her heart sank. About what? About who I am, he said. He explained that he owned a small network of medical clinics across the state. Years ago, a nurse had saved his daughter's life after an accident. That nurse had worked double shifts, exhausted, unnoticed, just like Amelia. I come to this diner because it reminds me of where I started, he said. And because sometimes, you find people who need a door opened. Amelia shook her head. I don't understand. I want to help you go back to school, Daniel said. Nursing school. Her breath caught. I can't accept that. You can't, he said calmly. And you should. Why? She demanded, tears streaming freely now. Why me? Because you didn't stop caring, even when life gave you every reason to, he replied. The challenge wasn't just accepting help. It was believing she deserved it. That night, Amelia didn't sleep. She thought about pride, fear, and the crushing weight of responsibility. She thought about Ethan's future. She thought about the girl she used to be. In the morning, she said yes. The months that followed were the hardest of her life. Balancing work, school, and family pushed her to the edge. She failed exams. She doubted herself constantly. There were nights she wanted to quit, convinced she was chasing a dream meant for someone else. But Daniel never pushed. He encouraged. He listened. Ethan cheered her on, taping her exam schedules to the fridge like trophies. The landlord was paid off. They moved to a slightly better apartment. Small victories piled up. Years passed. On the day Amelia graduated, she stood in her cap and gown, scanning the crowd. Ethan waved wildly from the front row. Daniel stood beside him, pride shining in his eyes. As Amelia accepted her diploma, tears filled her eyes, not of pain, but of gratitude. Later, at the same diner, Amelia sat at a booth, wearing scrubs now, a stethoscope resting around her neck. The Sunrise Diner looked the same, but she was different. A young waitress approached, eyes red, hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee. Amelia watched her closely, recognizing the signs. "Hey," Amelia said softly. "Are you okay?" The waitress hesitated, then shook her head. Amelia reached into her pocket and placed a folded bill on the table. "You're not alone," she said. "And this isn't charity. It's kindness." As she walked out into the sunlight, Amelia realized the stranger hadn't just changed her life. He had reminded her who she was and who she could become. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a cup of coffee, a kind question, and the courage to see someone who feels invisible.